Right, today we're looking at Unreal 5.1. I know it seems like Unreal 5 just came out a week ago, I think, but we're moving on to the newer and greater things. So today I'm going to cover how to get Unreal 5.1 to test for yourself, as well as the new Strata material system, as well as a few other bits and bobs in Unreal 5.1 that should get you excited for it. Now, the way we're doing it is we're building it from its source code, so that means that it can and it will change, including breaking changes. So use this purely for your, I guess, imagination, or purely for your interests. I wouldn't be doing absolutely anything in there because there's a great chance that between updates of Unreal 5.1 until it's officially released, save files and stuff are going to be completely broken. And some of the features aren't complete yet either, as we'll see with the Strata system. But it's just cool to have a look at. So we're going to start by how to build Unreal from source code. Alright, so what you're going to need is you're going to need Visual Studio to start with to compile the code. Now, there is actually a bug with Visual Studio 2022 at the moment that causes it to be unable to build Unreal. Until that bug is fixed in Visual Studio, you're going to need to use an older version. Epic themselves actually just recommend staying to 2019 for the time being. So go ahead, you have to click on older downloads when you go to the downloads. So you get to this page, and then you just download at the very bottom as older downloads, and then we can grab Visual Studio for 2019. Go ahead and download that. You're also going to need access to Epic Games GitHub. There's a few, Epic has a thing, you just basically have to log in with your Epic Games account and link it to your GitHub account, and then you get access to it, so that we can go ahead and go to the Unreal GitHub section. Lastly, you're going to need GitHub Desktop, which looks like this, and go ahead and log into your GitHub on GitHub Desktop with your GitHub account. So while Visual Studio is downloading and we have this, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a new repository. So we can just hit add and clone repository. Now if you've logged into your GitHub account, then you can just scroll down and Epic's going to show up here, and we can click Unreal Engine. Then I'm going to choose a location to save this. I've already got it downloaded because, like a cooking show, it's to save time. So I'm just going to call this V2, for example, and hit clone. And then that's going to download. I think it's about 8 gig, 10 gigs in that. There you go, it says right there, whatever that many things to download. It's somewhat big, so it'll take a while. Alright, so once it's finished downloading, you're going to be presented by a screen that looks like this. What we want to do is we want to switch from the current branch called release. We want to scroll all the way down to UE5 main, which, yeah, here we go. It's at the top for me because it's recent, UE5 main. So there is one called UE5 early access, release engine staging, release engine test. They're various bits and bobs, but basically the UE5 main is going to be sort of where all the action happens for development, and then these ones down here are just for Epic's internal development before they submit releases and all that. So go ahead and switch to UE5 main. It may take a minute. Alrighty, so when we are on UE5 main branch, what we can do is this fetch origin is just going to update and download any updates if there is any available. I do not believe there is. Oh, no, there is. Look at that. So there you go. This is getting updated daily, so that's probably why. So what we can do is we can then hit pull, and that'll download that update. Alright, so after that's pulled, then what we can do is we can go into where it downloaded, which is here. There we go. So you're going to get, it's not going to quite look like this. Actually, it might look a bit like this. What we want to do is we want to start with this setup.bat, and what that's going to do is download all the third-party dependencies that Unreal needs to work. So the user account control is going to ask us if we want to make changes to the hard drive. We hit yes, and this is just going to sit there. Now, you have to do this every time there's an update, but it won't necessarily download things every time there's an update, because unless the third-party stuff has been updated, it won't actually download anything. So once that's done, we can hit generate project files, and wait for that to run, and that'll generate the Visual Studio stuff. So while that's running, we can pop over to Visual Studio. So hop into the Visual Studio installer. There's a few more things we need to make sure that's installed by default with Visual Studio. So we can hit modify right here to change and install after we've done it. What we want is desktop development with C++ and game development with C++ ticked by default. Then go over to individual components and we're going to search for some. So we first want C++ profiling tools, like so. Make sure that is ticked. We then want C++ address sanitizer. Make sure that's ticked. We want Windows SDK. Windows SDK. Now by default, I think this one is the one that gets installed by default. So we actually want one that is 10.0.18362 or newer. So it's that one, this one, or newer. So I just installed it and the newest Windows 10 one available. I think I just unticked one of them, but yeah. So make sure that is done. And then what we can do is we can hit modify and it'll start downloading those extra packages we need, and they're required to compile the engine code properly. So you just saw in the background that it finished generating the project files, so we'll just wait for Visual Studio to finish installing. Alright, now that Visual Studio has finished installing those extra bits, what we can do is go back to our Git here, and you'll notice there's a UE5.sln. That's a Visual Studio solution, so we double click it, and that it will open Visual Studio. Now it'll take a little bit because it loads 111 projects. They're the various compilers and plugins and all sorts of things that make up Unreal 5. As you can see, they're all here. It'll take a second for them to load everything, restore this thing. IntelliSense is probably going to continue running in the background. That's okay because we don't plan on editing any of the code, so we don't need IntelliSense. So what we can go ahead and do is build the project. So that's as simple as right-clicking up here and clicking Build Solution, or F7. Now, word of warning, this is like a full day build. So I have a AMD 5900X and it took about 8 hours to build. Building off an SSD is also faster than building off a hard drive, so keep that in mind as well. So go ahead and build and then go do something else for the day. So another word of warning is Epic may push updates to the branch that cause this to build or not build, to fail while building. And that's something you just got to live with, because you know that's the reason why it's like the source code and not, you know, on the Epic Games launcher yet, is because it's still got bugs in it, it's still being worked on. So don't expect this, and don't get upset or anything if, you know, there's a cool new update and you update it and you can't build it, because that's just how it is. So once you've finished building that, which takes a while, what we can do is inside our folder with all the Unreal stuff, what we can do is we can go ahead. Oh, one common reason for build fail is actually the hard drive full. So once this is fully built, it can take you know, a huge amount of space. We're 150 gig already and it's still going up. So 200 gig. So make sure you've got, you know, 200-300 gigs spare on your drive for this to happen, because if you run out of space then the build's going to fail and you have to start the whole process again on another hard drive or SSD. So once that's done, how do we launch Unreal? Pretty easy. What we want to do is go into the engine folder here, and then binaries, and then Win64, and just scroll down a little bit, and we're going to find in here, a little bit further, the Unreal Editor.exe. Just double click it. So you put that on your desktop if you really wanted to. Whatever it is wherever it is you want to put that. We can go ahead and launch that. And so we'll get to this screen here. And sure enough, now it's going to say that even Unreal 5 stuff, it'll do the exact same thing when Unreal 5 first released. You may remember, it's like, would you like to create a copy of this project or convert in place, all that sort of stuff. I have a project already, so I'm going to use that. And as you can see here, Unreal Editor 5.1.0. Now, a few things to note about 5.1.0 out of the bat. In our project settings, we have some new settings. So the more excited thing I'm about, and none of this is documented, and all of this is subject to change. So just because it's here now doesn't mean it's actually going to be in the 5.1 release, and it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be like this in the 5.1 release. So the first thing we have, if we scroll down a little bit, which I'm very excited for, if I can find it, this high quality translucency reflections. So if you remember in my like Unreal 5 update video or something, you know, I thought that I had heard that Unreal was getting translucency now for sort of lumen reflections for translucency. I don't think it ended up in the final Unreal release, but it's in here now. So we can tick that and we will get lumen reflections on translucent objects instead of reverting to screen space or capture stuff. Also in here that is of interest, a little further down, is, here we go, Strata. So we have enable Strata materials, Strata bytes per pixels, Strata opaque materials, refraction, I don't know why I thought that said reflection, and advanced visualization shaders. So now what Strata is closer to how a traditional render engine works. So Unreal sort of has this Uber shader, which you may remember, which just sort of has everything in it that accepts as a input. So if I go ahead and open a material, I just create a new random one. So we just have all the inputs here, and this is like an Uber shader. Now we can change the type of material it adheres, which sort of changes our inputs, but it's still the underlying shader code that's the same. Now Strata is closer to how something such as a path tracing engine works. So that includes RenderMan, Octane, Redshift, V-Ray, Arnold, cycles, everything. So in Blender, it looks like this. So we actually just have a material output, which accepts what's called a BSDF, which I at one point remembered what it stood for, but I don't anymore. And we have different types of BSDF. So we have the principal BSDF, which is based on a paper from Disney, which pretty much everything has. And this is what Unreal's is based off of. We got like base color, metallic, roughness, all that extra stuff. We also have like a glass BSDF, a diffuse, a refraction, a translucent, you know, and we have these BSDF data that we then pass on to the output of the shader. And so that's how Strata works. So instead of having that Uber shader with all the stuff in there, instead what we've got is sort of different BSDFs that we can then plug into the output. Now there's this bytes per pixel, which is sort of how it stores that data. From what I can tell, it represents its materials complexity level. And then there's some stuff like rough refraction and some visualization stuff. So interesting stuff. Need to restart the engine for those changes to take effect, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Oh, there's also energy conservation on material. I can't remember if that's new or not. Boop, and don't save that. Alrighty. After some lengthy shader recompilations, it's finished. So the first thing you know is this scene looks very different with Strata on. So Strata works best when the stuff is built from the ground up to work with it. So I'm having a sneaking suspicion that our classroom scene I've been used for demoing is probably not going to look very good. Actually, this isn't looking that bad, really, in the end. Definitely seen worse. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to immediately test out. Oops. That's weird. Don't expect this to be like fantastic out the box. It's missing quite a lot of things, and that's because it's actively being developed. One thing I did want to try is reflections. So on translucent objects, in this case we're not even getting screen space reflections, so that's probably not a good start. Interesting. I also don't know if screen space works with the Strata as well. Well, we can have a look at the Strata and maybe turn that off. So, Strata material. So, let's have a look at how it works. So, we go ahead and open up our material, and we've got this. So, the output is now changed a little bit. So we now have this Strata material output, which has our opacities, world position, ambient occlusion, pixel depth offset, and what's called a front material, and that's it. And then we have this Strata legacy converter, which I have a sneaking suspicion is representing or will be changed to a principled BSDF. As that's what it is. We do have a couple of other BSDFs. We have a hair, single layer water, what's called a slab. I'm not sure how to describe it. I'm thinking it's like a velvet shader, maybe. I don't know. It's funky. Yeah, or maybe this slab is the principled shader. I'm just looking base, edge, metallic, roughness, normal, tangent. I don't know. It's interesting. Haziness, thickness, fuzz. Oh well, interesting. We also have an unlit BSDF for emission materials and a volumetric fog cloud BSDF, which also looks interesting. I think that's for the clouds and stuff like that. But for the most part, this works pretty similar. The only thing is it probably will generate different looking results to the standard Unreal shader. So don't expect these to be like one-to-one with Unreal. I also have a sneaking suspicion these will produce better results for the path tracer, which I haven't enabled in this scene, but because I don't think, ray tracing isn't on at the moment. But if I go into one of these materials, yeah, see there, it's like it's darker. It's weird. Oh gosh, it's, as you can see, it's auto-converted the material, which is pretty handy. So we do have that. So it does have out-of-the-box working with your existing materials, which is really cool. I do not know why. I could probably go into the glass material actually and have a look as to, yeah, see, that just looks really dark. Alright, alright, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself there. So I've gone back to a simpler setup. So here I've just made a translucent material. So as you can see, it's set to translucent blend mode. I've also set it to surface translucency volume. Here I've made it reflective. Now at the moment, high quality translucency is turned off, and we can see this is what it looks like. Now if I turn it on, this is what I get. It's a bit hard to see, but you can see there's reflections going on. So if I bump this up to maybe 0.75, what we're going to get is a bit more obvious. Now, I believe that's simply because we have a look at the lumen scene. This is what it's trying to reflect, which looks a bit dodgy. Here's the reflection view. So yeah, this is what it's reflecting, which in no way does it look decent. So that's probably why the reflections look like that. I'm assuming if I turn on ray tracing, which then doesn't use the mesh distance fields, but rather instead uses just the actual mesh itself, then it's probably going to look better. Oh, look at that. If I actually go out, it looks better than when I'm up real close. That's strange. Anyway, then we're going to get really nice reflections on that. One thing I did want to try as well is, does it work with the other translucency mode, which is forward shading? I'm going to go out on a limb and say it doesn't. But I could be wrong. Oh, it does work. There you go. Well, look at that. I was wrong. So, just like that, you've now got translucency. Now, while we're on the subject of translucency, there's one more thing I didn't mention at the start, which they have now added... is there a translucency tab, or is it somewhere else? Oh, there is a translucency. Enable order-independent translucency. Apparently this will enable sorting artifacts by having multiple translucent objects behind each other. I don't know if that was the thing. Oh, I assume like they're either on top of each other or behind each other. Well, there you go. So if you want to give them this stuff a try, go ahead and knock yourself out. Don't use it for anything important, and expect changes, bugs, and breaks very often. If you're like everyone else, then and you don't want to experiment with this sort of stuff and risk crashes and breaking your stuff and all that sort of stuff, then I would just wait till it comes out on the Epic Games Launcher. But there you go. Hope you enjoyed it.